If you think about it, there's really one episode at the center of the Russia investigation. The notorious 2016 meeting at Trump Tower, where Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and then campaign chair Paul Manafort all met with a Russian government-connected lawyer. The purpose of the meeting? Get dirt on Hillary Clinton. How do we know that? Because of the email written by my next guest, the man who set up the meeting. His name is Rob Goldstone. But before we talk with him, let's run down quickly what we know. Goldstone met Trump through his work as a publicist for a Russian pop star, Eamon Agalarov. I'm sure he'll correct my pronunciation. It was Goldstone who helped make Trump's dream of bringing his Miss Universe pageant to Moscow a reality. And as I said, Goldstone is also the author of his now infamous email exchange with Donald Trump Jr., in part promising information that would incriminate Hillary, and that the high-level and sensitive information was part of the Russian government's support for Mr. Trump. The meeting that ensued from that exchange is now at the center of the probe. Goldstone was in the room at Trump Tower. Critics of Trump say the evidence, at the very least, about that meeting could show an attempt to collude with Russia. And the biggest reason that they say that is the email. So let's get after it with Rob Goldstone. The book, Pop Stars, Pageants, and Presidents: How an Email Trumped My Life. Rob Goldstone, thank you for taking the opportunity.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it. Wish you never wrote it? Not the book, the email.
You know, I've thought so much about that. And knowing what I know now, 12, 14 months later, I would probably read each of those 137 words of that email, then read it again, and then go, oh, no, and hit delete.
So the short version is, you did it because your client asked you to. Not because you're a Russian operative, not because you had dirt yourself. None of what we've heard speculated is true.
And not because I even knew that they had dirt. I did it because my client, who I managed as well as handled publicity for, had asked me to do something which he felt was simple. Just get a meeting.
Why do you think they wanted the meeting? Do you think they had connections to the Russian government?
Why they wanted the meeting, I'm not sure. I think there may have been an element of grandstanding. I've always believed that maybe this attorney who knew Emin's father and was a staunch advocate of the Magnitsky Act. Now, at the time, I'd never heard of the Magnitsky Act. Now, I should actually be a spokesman for or against the Magnitsky Act, because that's all I've heard for a year. It was important to this attorney to get a meeting. And I think the Agalarov simply said, we can get you a meeting. Well, I'd always been the conduit for them to the Trumps ever since Miss Universe. So I heard on your show once, you had an attorney on that basically said it was a ludicrous idea that me as a music publicist would be asked. Well, why not? I'd been asked every other time. What would be ludicrous to me is if I hadn't been asked.
So the stuff that was in the email, this is the Russian government, this is the kind of dirt they're looking for. Did you know either of those aspects to be true?
No.
So why'd you say it?
So my client gave me very vague information, but it was quite specific. There just wasn't a lot of it. So he said it was a well-connected attorney, either a current or former prosecutor, who had some kind of potentially damaging information on illegal Russian funding to the Democrats and their campaign.
Did you know she was connected to the Russian government?
First of all, I didn't even know it was a she. I just know it was an it at that stage. No. So I said connected. What does connected mean? And Emin said to me, connected. I asked again, connected. And on the third attempt, I flippantly said, connected to the power grid, maybe, in an attempt to get an answer. And there was silence. And as you know, you've pushed people, you push and push, and then you go, okay, connected.
All right. I also
Who else are they
connected
connected
in that
to?
context.
Well, so
it
did
would
I
be to the
think
Russian power structure, not the grid. Now, one of the gray areas. So you send the email, but then there are conversations between your client and Donald Jr. We know this, that there are records of the conversations. Donald Jr. says, I don't remember any of those. But you say in the book, oh, he remembers. He has to remember, because after those conversations, that's when the meeting was made. You weren't on those calls.
I wasn't on those
But your confidence is 100% they talked about this.
I can only go by what I've read and what I've seen. So I've seen testimony from Don Jr. in which he said, I believe there were a few short calls. But then Emin, about a month ago, gave a full interview on, I believe, Vice on HBO, in which he said, no, we did speak.
Right.
And he laid out what they said, and it seemed a bit vague. But he said at the end of it, Don said, if you're asking for the meeting, I'll do it. So I've always said this. My email was designed to get Don Jr.'s attention, not to get a meeting.
And it worked. So Manafort and Kushner, you didn't invite them. Did you know that they were going to the meeting?
Not until after that phone call.
How do you think they got invited to the meeting?
If my email from Don Jr. is to be believed, he said, also joining us will be Paul Manafort and my brother-in-law, Jared Kushner. I always had assumed, after that call, he invited them, which is why I always thought that call is what's important.
Do you think that there's any reason to believe that the president or then candidate knew about the meeting, wanted his guys there, wanted his son there, or any combination?
I have no reason to know that's true or to know it isn't true. I've been asked this a couple of times, and over the past year, what do I think? I've always brought it back to me because I think human nature is the same. If my father was running for president and I was holding a meeting with important Russians in my father's conference room with his campaign chairman and my brother-in-law, I would tell my father.
Stands to reason. One step backwards before we get to the meeting itself. 2013, the way you knew the Trumps was through the pageant. One of the things that's come up as a point of intrigue was the dossier and the salacious tape. You say, I don't know about any tape, but you know where he slept when he was in Moscow. How do you know, and are you 100% sure where he slept?
What I do know is that Donald Trump didn't know where he was going to be sleeping until at least a couple of days before, because Emin and I were fighting over which hotel to put him in. And I had always said the Ritz-Carlton is the place for Donald Trump, in one of their elegant suites. We never specified which one. Eventually, Emin agreed. And so when I read the provenance that's why Trump wanted to be there, because of the Obamas had slept there, right, and the alleged peeing incident, to me, I was like, well, if it happened, he must have worked really quickly because he barely knew where he was staying anyway. And there was only this very small window of time when it could have taken place, because all the rest of the time he was with us.
But is it true that he stayed there? Because he has said on the record, I didn't stay there.
Well, the old Rob Goldstone publicist would have said 100% he stayed there. This experience I have been through has allowed me to keep a 10% question mark where I go, of course he stayed there. We dropped him off there. He came down the next morning at 7 a.m. Could it be that in the middle of the night he was whisked away, maybe on a sleigh by Santa Claus? Sure, well, anything is possible in this story that keeps on giving. I believe he slept in the Ritz-Carlton.
And why wouldn't he tell the truth about that? We don't know. You can't answer that. One other thing. The many other things. There's a lot that's in this book. The idea of meeting Putin during the pageant. It was supposed to happen. It didn't. They said that another dignitary was stuck in traffic, so it couldn't happen. How important was it to Trump to meet Putin, and why?
I think it was important. I mean, we'd asked him that if he did want to meet him, he should dictate a letter and have it written and sent. And I noticed that when I was shown it, he'd scrawled at the bottom, lots of beautiful women. And to me, that's a very Donald Trump invitation of, come, it'll be great, or let's meet, and it's anybody else's normal way of saying, what a great event. His is lots of beautiful women. I think he wanted to meet him. He asked me on the last day, what's the status of this? I asked Emin. He said what he'd always said. Official protocol had been done. Right. If it could happen, it would happen at the Kremlin. It didn't happen because the King of Holland was delayed in traffic, and I dedicated my book to the King of Holland. Because when I was giving testimony on the Hill...
If that meeting had happened, you'd be in the soup.
That's it.
Don Jr. had reason to know that the information he wanted at this meeting would be coming from the Russian government. At least that's what was suggested in the email, and you don't know that your client ever told him otherwise.
Correct.
So as far as you know, he was fine with going to a meeting where the Russian government was going to provide him dirt on Hillary Clinton.
He never said otherwise.
Okay. One other quick thing. So you go to the meeting, and it all becomes about the Magnitsky Act. That's all true. Nothing happened in that meeting that was about dirt about Hillary Clinton.
It's more complicated than that. I've always believed this was a classic bait and switch, but people were quick to dismiss the switch. I believe the switch is as important as the bait. Magnitsky, as I've learned, is a hugely important thing. And not to me and not to you, but to Vladimir Putin. If you remember, he spoke about it at Helsinki while standing next to Donald Trump.
Created a sanction structure. He did lots of stuff.
So when the attorney talked about adoptions, she was talking about really just the punishment that the Russians are doing. The very people that she talked about who were doing this illegal funding to Democrats were the Ziff brothers and Bill Browder. If I'm not mistaken, they are the architects of the Magnitsky Act. So it's all connected in some way. And hopefully the incredible job, and I don't know how they do this, that the Mueller team are investigating all these pieces, maybe they will find that that is what it was, that it was a bait and switch, but it's hugely important. That's what the attorneys seem to be giving them. Look, these people who are these bad people who are giving money to the Democrats and to the candidate Hillary Clinton are also the architects of the Magnitsky Act. Lift those sanctions.
Rob Goldstone, there's a lot more in the book about your experience, how it changed your life, what it was like to be with Mueller and his men and women as opposed to congressional people who are looking into this. And it's a really interesting read, and it matters now as much as ever. Rob Goldstone, thank you very much.